Alright, I have some slight difficulties explaining myself or explaining this very phenomenon, but I'm going to do my best regardless. Let me just check here. There seems to be time and energy vampires everywhere. And it's this odd phenomenon where if you attend like a lower grade place, there seems to be more time and energy vampires there. They seem to be rampant and they seem to be obsessed with cheap and with just and with fair. Because in their lives, everything has to be just, everything has to be fair. There's actually, in this regard, and not to get too political, but there's actually a great book written about this very thing. Or not about that thing, but about something related. The book is called The Lessons of History by Will and Ariel Durant. And in the book, the authors argue that in any given society, one has to choose between freedom and equity. You can't have both. You're either 100% equal or you're 100% free. You can't be 50-50 and you can't have it all. If you want to be equal, that means slavery. Look at North Korea, look at the Soviet Union, look at Cuba, look at Venezuela, all those kinds of communist countries. They're equal. Their people are equal, but they ain't free. They surely ain't free. If you want the polar opposite, I mean, in this context, the closest country which is the polar opposite is, of course, America, United States of America, especially with the way it was founded. But the polar opposite is then anarchy. Everyone is free, but nobody is in charge. Whatever, nobody wants that. But the point is, these people, the time and energy vampires, they want it all. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to end on a very, very bizarre note, but I'm also going to sort of like make it sense. So, way back in the day, when I was traveling domestically, when I was riding domestic planes in my country, I would frequent one of the lounges at the airport, or at one of the airports. That lounge was pretty decent. It wasn't good, it wasn't exceptional, but it was decent. The food there was good, it was relaxing, it was calm. You didn't have to be around ordinary people who vented, who moaned, who yelled, who ranted, and who couldn't behave. It was like a relaxing place. But like with everything, people have to ruin it. If it's good, why not ruin it, right? So, first of all, they started going woke. The lounge started gradually removing meats because they wanted to be vegan friendly. Previously, way back in the day, there were meat dishes, meatballs. I don't think there was steak, but there surely was meatballs. And I think ground beef as well. And various other cuts, even ham. Nowadays, well, I haven't been there actually for years, but after a while, they cut off pretty much everything that had to do with meat. Pretty much just vegetables. Literally at the very end, during my final times there, I couldn't even help myself with dinner because there was no dinner there that was worth eating. The only thing that was worth eating, and I was at a low carb diet at that time, which I am now, by the way, and sometimes I crave bread. So I helped myself with cheese and bread. That was pretty much it. They had some sour cream that I applied to the cheese on my sandwich, my cheese sandwich, and it was actually pretty good. It wasn't healthy, but whatever. You can't eat healthy all the time. Anyway, there was hardly any meat. I think they had like these very tiny ham, sort of like, I don't know what they're called, like ham pieces. They're that big, but they were very small. Now that I think about it, I think they had some eggs as well for protein, with respect to protein, but after a while they got rid of the eggs as well. But by the very end, it was just salads and grains. Like nobody wanted to eat that crap. Nobody. Here's something that's even worse, actually. So they used to, and by the way, this comes with a disclaimer. There is product placement in this video or in this podcast, but I'm not advertising for or against any of these brands, but whatever. Doesn't really matter. I need to say the name of the brands because of the example. They used to have free refills of soda drinks, such as Pepsi Cola. That used to be a thing. However, after the Ukraine war, and after learning that supposedly Pepsi still was being sold in Russia, I think, they decided to ban it. Because, oh, Putin loves Pepsi, so we can't give our guests Pepsi. So that's why they replaced it with Coca-Cola. Instead of Pepsi Cola, now they had Coca-Cola, simply because, I don't remember it so very well, they taped, you know how there were like soft drink dispensers? They taped over the Pepsi brand, and they stopped using the dispenser. But the dispenser was still there. It wasn't just functional. And they instead they replaced, or instead they put Coca-Cola bottles next to it. It was so dumb. Here's what's even worse. The very same airline, by the way, because it was an airline who ran this lounge, they couldn't even sell a particular brand of milk chocolate to their passengers. They would stop offering it during flights, simply because of that brand. Its mother company supposedly had some factories that were still up and running in Russia, supposedly, according to hearsay, whatever. So they couldn't sell that particular chocolate. So the entire lounge, and by extension, the entire airline went woke. Now, where am I going with this? At the same time, conveniently, or inconveniently in my case, time and energy vampires started showing up in the lounge. I don't know why. All of a sudden you had these annoying people who couldn't keep their mouths shut, who didn't understand the social norms of the codes of a lounge, that when you're making a phone call, you don't shout, but you talk with a lower voice to not disturb other people, because that's common courtesy. That's their policy. That's like an inherently written and understood code in any sort of airport lounge. And there are meeting rooms, conference rooms, where you can yell out loud if you must. But don't do it in the midst of the lounge. So these annoying people would show up. They would either yell on their phone, or they would watch their silly ass television shows on their on their phones or their tablets with the sound on maximum. They couldn't wear earplugs or headphones to prevent others from being subjected to the noise. Or they would bring their kids, these bratty little kids that they couldn't discipline, and it would just be awful to be there. The food sucked. They couldn't even, the Pepsi Cola dispenser was out of order, and they put Coca-Cola bottles next to it. It was so ridiculous. I just had to laugh. And the worst sort of people up here there. Now, I'm gonna end with a little bit of bizarre note, just to emphasize how weird these time and energy vampires can be. So, because of that, I started going to another lounge, because there were more lounges there. Now, the other lounge was better. Now, recently, I was traveling abroad, and I went to this other lounge of the same brand, but not in the domestic terminal, but in the international terminal, because I was traveling internationally. So I went to the lounge. It was good. It was great. No annoying people for the most part, except at the very end, when here's what happened. There are water coolers or water dispensers where you can pour yourself water in your glass. And the deal is, you're supposed to drink by the glass provided by the lounge. You can't bring your own bottle and refill your bottle, even though nobody would care. And there was no sign saying you couldn't refill your bottle there. Nobody would have cared. And even if it said that you couldn't refill your own bottle there were other water coolers or water dispensers at the airport outside of the lounge. So it wasn't like you couldn't refill your own bottle there at the airport. Irregardless, some dude who must be a time and energy vampire, those are my words, because of his behavior. And as I'm saying this, it's so weird, it's so bizarre. As I'm gonna say this, I wanna cringe. I want to look at myself like a question mark because it's so bizarre, but whatever. That guy brought his water bottle not at the water cooler, but at the wash basin in the men's restroom. You know the wash basin in the men's restroom? Where after having wiped your arse with toilet paper and thrown it into the toilet, you walk out and you wash your hands and you literally clean the shit of your hands. But which means that this is a very dirty environment. That was where this chap was filling his water bottle from the wash basin with that particular tap water. I mean, I wanted to vomit when I saw it. That's TEV behavior right there. Time and energy vampire behavior. Really, it really is. So, where was I going with this? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Just stay away from those people. If you see people refilling their water bottles in the men's washroom or in the women's restroom for that matter, from the wash basins there, refilling that sort of tap water in their drinking bottle, then stay away from them, because they're probably the same sort of people who don't want to pay for anything. Bizarrely enough, he was in a lounge, which meant that he actually had paid for access, but still. These are the same sort of people who also don't understand that there are codes and norms and rules, and that you don't yell in the lounge. Alright. Bizarrely enough, it happens sometimes. So, anyway. Yeah, that's it for today. If you want to learn more about time and energy vampires and how to potentially get rid of them, and so that you don't have to subject yourself to their vile horrors, then get subscribed to my email list. The link to do so is below the episode description wherever you're watching or listening to this. Thank you, and I'll see you later.